Ho ho ho! Merry Christmas, everybody! Yeah, it's Christmas Eve. I don't know when this episode will actually come out, but it is Christmas Eve, so I'm going to get in the Christmas spirit for this pod, because why not? I'm Will Ashton. I'm your usual co-host for Cinemaholics, and I'm going to do another instant take for you on Nosferatu, the new Robert Eggers film. This is his fourth movie as a director. I believe people probably know him best from The Lighthouse and The Witch. You know, two big A24 films, kind of establishing A24 films, you know, as far as the aesthetic and brand. But, you know, since then, he's done The Northman, which came out in 2022, which I really did like a lot. It was in my top 10 for that year. I feel like the response, compared to the first two films that he made, was somewhat muted. I think that was, at the time, probably his second best, though I really do like The Witch. I'm not trying to downplay my appreciation of that film. But now he's had some time to finally get what he's long considered to be his sort of passion project film, which is Nosferatu, which is the adaptation of, you know, the classic 1922 horror film of the same name, which is rather infamously a not-so-subtle adaptation of Dracula, where they didn't really get the rights to it. You know, there was a whole thing with Bram Stoker trying to destroy the film. It's kind of a miracle that it even exists, but you can read all about the history of the film. That is all to say that it is probably the most famous Dracula adaptation of all time, but it's not really a full Dracula adaptation. Nosferatu isn't per se Dracula. He's not considered the Count. And likewise, you know, you have a bunch of different characters who have different names, but you know that they're supposed to be Van Helsing and Jonathan and, you know, all the other characters. And that is no exception with this one. So from what I can gather, Robert Eggers has been trying to get this movie made for at least, I think, the last few years, but I think he goes back even to like when he got The Witch off the ground. It may have been, I remember reading an article around the time the Northman came out that he was trying to get this one made. I think even before the Northman came out, I think he wanted it to be his either first or second or third film. I think, you know, it's been something that's been on his mind a lot. I think it's one of those things where I think he did a stage adaptation. I'm trying to remember. There was like a New Yorker article where he discussed this. And it was like from the lead up to the Northman. And it made it apparent that it's not just an adaptation for adaptation's sake. I think it's something he's really mulled on. It's something he really takes passionately. And I know some people were kind of critical or kind of putting their nose up and being like, well, why do we need another adaptation of Nosferatu? Why do we need another adaptation of Dracula? And I think it justifies itself with the work. And that's to say, I really did enjoy this film quite a lot. I figured I would, granted, but I think just seeing it fully fleshed out, and that's not to say it's his best, or I don't even think it's his second best, but I think it just really feels like a full throttle Eggers horror film. And, you know, I can see why people feel that The Witch is his best, and I can certainly sympathize with that. But I think even he has expressed some feelings that he feels like it doesn't fully live up to what he was trying to do creatively. And when you see his more recent films, there is this sense that he is, you know, fully coming alive with his vision. There are these beautiful long one takes and just these very well composed shots and these very exquisitely detailed period designs. And it really feels like with each consecutive film, he becomes fully embodied of what he wants to pull off as an artist and what he's trying to pull off as a visionary. And it's just really kind of not only delightful to see, but just refreshing at a time when such details feel so kind of lackluster in cinema today. You kind of get this sense that a lot of movies on this size and scale are just kind of throwing things together, relying heavily on CG, kind of just figuring it out in post. And you just watch one of his films and just see the level of concentration and care that goes into the production of the film alone. And it's really quite marvelous. And I think what is appealing to me watching this film, having read Dracula within the last year or so, is that this feels probably, of all the adaptations that I've seen, which are probably about a little more than half a dozen at this point, the most cohesive fusion of both the original Nosferatu film and Bram Stoker's original text. And that's to say that it honors, I think, the eerie sort of ghostly atmosphere of the original film. That the thing that I think makes that original work so haunting and indelible. Even though it's a silent film, you feel this dread, you feel this sort of unsettling tension. And if you're lucky enough, as I have, to see it with a live score, you can really feel the sort of atmospheric dread that builds up. And the performances and the camera work are truly iconic and unforgettable in that film. And that's not to say that this film really matches it in that specific sense, but there is a clear design to kind of capture that, eerie, otherworldly quality that captures while being a little bit more true to the text and details that are in the book and sometimes haven't really been fully realized in some of the other adaptations, at least that I have seen. As far as this one goes, I mean, there's a lot of homage paid, obviously, to the original Nosferatu, but I think people also know some winks and nods to, for instance, the Coppola version and the Werner Herzog film Nosferatu the Vampire from the 70s. The end of the film, specifically, without getting into spoilers, is very one-to-one, I think, with that film in particular. And I think that's not to say that this movie is fully owing itself to other adaptations. Like I said, I think it does feel very much like an Eggers film, but also at the same time kind of feels like 100 years of cinematic adaptations are kind of coming together, fusing into this sort of long-awaited kind of blend of the original book and the probably most, like I said, most iconic film adaptation, even if it's not the most direct one. And I think, it should be said that reparations, I'm pretty sure, have been made to the original Nosferatu. I think Bram Stoker, I rewatched the film with a new score recently, like back in October, and I think he was credited as far as that version goes. And obviously he's credited in this film. So, I think the Stoker estate has made peace with this, even though Bram Stoker during his time was very much not pleased with what was going on with the F.W. Murrow's film. But that is neither here nor there. We're talking about the Robert Eggers one. I'm not here to give a little history lesson on the original Nosferatu. I think you can find a lot of texts and books and videos and all that about that if you so wish to explore that. But in any case, to go a little bit more in depth with this film, as far as the performances go, I think there is an expected greatness to come from folks like, Willem Dafoe, who is really, just chewing the scenery in the best way, giving a truly Dafoe take on Van Helsing and in quotation marks. Obviously, he has a different name in the film, but that's more or less who he's playing. And, it's kind of delightful to see him in that role, knowing that he was also in Shadow of a Vampire, which is a film about the making of the original Nosferatu. And so he's kind of had the chance to kind of play both sides of the coin in a very fun way. And obviously also he's become a muse of sorts, much like Anya Taylor-Joy, who is in this one, by the way, who she was supposed to be, and she was replaced by Lily Rose Depp, who I'll talk about in a little bit if I have the time. I feel like I'm going longer than I expect on this, and I'm also waiting for a ride, which is kind of my indirect time ticker for how long I could talk about this movie. But in any case, it does feel like Dafoe and Eggers are really kind of simpatico at this point and really kind of respect and idolize each other. And you can see that in the performance and the way that he's directed. I think it just kind of feels like Dafoe is given full reign to just really kind of ham it up, but never go too big or too broad. And I should also, like I said, pay due to Bill Skarsgård, who plays Count Orlok, who is the titular Nosferatu, with some really truly just incredible makeup. I mean, I don't think I would really even know that this was Bill Skarsgård if I didn't, look up the credits before the film and find out that was him. And that extends also to his performance, which I was reading a little bit before the movie, or I saw the film rather, that he changed his voice to such an extent that his vocal coach was saying that he could do irreparable damage to his vocal cords if he pursued the voice that he does in this film. And he went ahead and did it anyway, which is, maybe not the most ethical or logical decision for someone to do, but I really respect the hustle. And I think that kind of rules. And yeah, I mean, it is a truly deeply unsettling performance. I think he just really relishes it. And it's refreshing to see him in this film as well, because he was supposed to also be in The Northman in the role that his brother Alexander Skarsgård ended up playing. And I think Alexander Skarsgård did a really nice job in that film, but you watch his performance in this and you do kind of have to wonder, like, would that film be even better knowing that Bill Skarsgård would have been attached to that role in one way or another? But speaking of actors who were replacing other actors in Eggers' films, Lily Rose Depp, as I mentioned, came into this as a replacement for the, prototypical actor for Robert Eggers, which is, of course, Anya Taylor-Joy. And I think that was the element of the film that I was most nervous about going into this, just because I don't dislike Lily Rose Depp, but I haven't seen enough of her work to really have a full assessed opinion of her, but I just kind of worry about, there was all this press about The Idol, and it's like my main frame of reference for her is Yoga Hosers, the Kevin Smith movie, and it's just like, I don't know, could she really live up to the task? And I gotta give props to where they're due, and I have to say that she really goes full throttle with this performance. It is a kind of uninhibited, just, balls to the wall performance, and yeah, I was pretty impressed. I don't think it's like, she's a real shoe of her time or anything, but she really committed to it. I think she's a dedicated actress, and I think she gives ultimately a pretty strong and unsettling performance in this, and I gotta give her credit for that. So I just got a message that I'm gonna have to head out pretty soon, so I'll try to wrap up relatively soon, which is to say the other cast members I think are worth noting are Nicholas Hoult, who is good in this as well, Aaron Taylor-Johnson, who is just a ton of fun, and Emma Corrin, who I was kind of hoping they would be in it more than they ultimately were. Like, they're in it a fair bit, but I don't think they get a whole lot to do outside of one pretty scary scene, or one or two scary scenes in the film, and so a little disappointed about that, but not enough to take away from what I appreciate about the film, which also includes, like I mentioned, the stellar production design, the score, which is great, I guess unbridled willingness to just get really nasty and dirty with it. There's been a lot written about how much this movie had, so many live rats just on set, and I know PETA didn't really care for that, but I don't know. I think that just kind of goes to show that Eggers is not one to chicken out and really just kind of go for it in a big and bold way. And before I wrap up, I do want to highlight, which I think will probably be the thing that if it gets any sort of awards attention that will be considered for, is the cinematography, which is really, truly very lovely. And like I said, there are so many long composite shots and these long one take things that just really get you unsettled and in the atmosphere of this, and help to make Eggers' vision come alive in such a fraught and unsettling way. I'm sorry I keep using that word, but in any case, I think it all comes together in a way that feels both very singular and the work of many different contributors, many different influences, and that is no small feat. And I got to give props where they're due. I think this is one of my favorite films for the year so far, and it's just a nice treat to get like a fully well-realized horror film like this at the end of the year, especially considering that even though we've had a lot of horror films in terms of quantity this year, I feel like the quality has kind of gone back and forth. I know a lot of people disagree on that. There have been a lot of films that, horror-wise, that people have really liked, and then I feel like I liked but didn't really love. I don't want to, name names at the moment, but this one was high on my expectation list, and it met my expectations and then some. So I'm very excited for other people to see it. I was excited to share my thoughts with you, but I gotta get going. Christmas calls. So with that, I have to say, ho, 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 Merry Christmas. And if this is the last recording for the year, I bid you all adieu and a nice new year. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.